I'm Elizabeth Rose, a creator and neurodivergent enabler, a maker of movement and visuals with an interest in people's core truths and finding unique ways to share our stories through various artistic mediums. This series of short films takes a 360 dive into the raw and expressive process of developing a new live performance. From costume design, choreography, research, and discovering new technologies, this all happened during my latest commission, Boundless Body. I flew from Australia in November 2024 to London during a 2-week development process, taking my 1-year-old son along for the ride. Within the 2 weeks of making this work, Christopher Thomas captured a rare and vulnerable insight into the making process, pulling back the curtain on what is often a solitude experience. Boundless Body premiered as the penultimate performance, closing the Digital Body Festival 2024. Being neurodivergent is a complex cosmopolitan of nuances that are individual. My challenges aren't the same as yours, nor are the labels we hold, but I'm drawn to share with you and reveal my truth, to let down my mask and show you my hidden narrative. I seek harmony in the cacophony of voices directing, dictating, and divulging day after day after day after day, in hopes we can communicate beyond this surface of human flesh, authentically, honestly, and with heart. One vessel to another, I'm here, boundless. People who are neurodivergent suffer because of the environments we have to exist in. They don't enable our strengths, instead they're highlighting our weaknesses. I wish we could all learn and grow from our differences. Everyone has a different way of thinking, and neurodivergent people should be given the opportunity to fly out of the nest and find the richness in the world and bring it back to the people that don't have that. I understand and respect that there are many degrees of being neurodivergent. The spectrum is vast, and every neurodivergent person has their own individual struggles and strengths, and they have to navigate them in this neurotypical world. And my goal is to bridge the gap for neurodivergent people in whatever way I can through the arts.
Something that I wanted to share is the language that's used around neurodiversity and neurodivergent. Forgive me if you already know this. This is something that I came across quite recently and I found it really helpful. So neurodiversity is something that everybody is part of. You are all neurodiverse because we have new environments, our biology makeup is all different, how we are nurtured from a young age, our experiences are all different. So therefore we are all neurodiverse. But somebody who is neurodivergent essentially has the process of the brain which is set up differently. So people who are dyslexic, people with autism, ADHD, there are a number of labels, and I do use that word labels because it has a lot of negatives that come with that. But essentially there is something about really understanding that language and how we communicate in that language.
This project was kind of going in very observantly and very openly to kind of see what we would find together as a whole team of all the different people and all the different conversations that we were having very presently. We're really touching in and tuning into my unique way of perceiving and being in the world with my own neurodiversities and perceptions, and really allowing myself to listen in and go with those intuitions rather than blocking them out or numbing myself to try and fit into somebody else's way of working. And I think it was this conversation of how do we all be very true to ourselves and bring that into the room rather than blocking any of ourselves out.
I really wanted to create a world for people to get lost in, and I wanted people to experience what it could be like if we were to be more sensitive to one another's neurodiversity, and for us to demonstrate what that could look like for us. And I think words just, fail me sometimes, and visuals and sounds and textures never do. Projects like this where you can create a world and like something that is so nuanced to you, you can actually physicalize it and begin to feel at peace, which I think is a very difficult thing. I don't often feel at peace, and so just being able to create an environment through all those different layers, that's just such an incredible thing to be able to do with technology. I think where it falters is accessibility. It's pricey. Not everyone has the capacity to be able to access great technology. Also, learning the programs is, once it's not easy, but it's you're like, oh yeah, okay, I can do that. But then it's finding the time and the resources to be able to learn. And for me, learning new things doesn't come very easily. I get quite triggered about learning things and new things and being in those situations where you're not knowing. So that's definitely been a personal challenge.
Dr. Helen Taylor, she's a researcher at Cambridge University, and she researches dyslexia, specifically how humans learn and create the knowledge that we need to adapt. And when sharing her research with me, she used the analogy, which it's really stuck with me. She talked about the hive, a beehive, and how every bee has a job. You have the honeybees who make the honey inside of the hive. You've got the bouncer bees who protect the space and check the pollen coming in, whether it's going to be poisonous or whether it's good honey, and they protect the door. And then you've got the bees who go out into the environment and they look for the pollen, the best pollen to bring back to the hive. Every bee has a job. Every bee is important. Every bee has worth. That analogy, when reflected into our society, is something that we can really learn from, and we all hold value as humans. Neurodivergent people, like neurotypical people, have strengths and weaknesses. The strengths of neurodivergent people are often overlooked, but some of them that I can think of that are obviously not specific to every neurodivergent person.
We see things in great detail, and we can see a 360 plan of something from every angle. It's scientifically proven that we're more empathetic, which means that when it comes to delivering work like that, I do see that I have a skill set where I'm able to connect with people on a very personal level, and that informs the work. And I think that is so important, that we see each other as humans and not as a dancer or as a costume designer. We're all people and we all have value. And I think because my value has often been diminished because of the label of being neurodivergent, then I seek that even more in people, because I don't want anyone to feel like that, that they don't hold value or... So I think there's a running theme in my work around that. But I would never say that I suffer being neurodivergent. I suffer because the environments aren't set up to support me.
Elizabeth, as part of your work, you've done a lot of research into neurodivergent ways of working. Can you talk about some of the differences you found in the approaches and working practices compared to experiences of being in an environment that isn't sensitive to neurodivergent people?
In terms of spaces and how they're set up,
through my previous company, Move Beyond Words, we did a research project which was supported by One Dance UK and commissioned by Rhombez School. And it was looking at creating a better understanding of preferred learning styles and then giving guidance on areas of supporting dancers in high-pressured environments and providing practical tools to help ourselves look after our well-being.
And a lot of the feedback that we were getting was around before you got into the space. So, providing if there's an audition or a meeting or, anything, that you give the details ahead of time to someone, and so they can go and have a look at the space, because there's something very uncomfortable about walking into a space that you haven't been in before. There's just a big anxiety around that.
Having that inside information in advance really supports those spaces.
And especially auditions, it's a really high pressured environment. It's very stressful before you even get into the space. So if casting directors could just provide that information, ahead of time, or say, get there half an hour early, just meditate into the space and, let us help you with anything that you need. It would just change things so dramatically, I think. There's definitely a lack of understanding around how it impacts people personally. I think it's very complex as well. My needs aren't the same as somebody else's. And so, I can understand that tailoring to all of these people and all of these different needs is expensive, it's time consuming. But I think there are some very small, subtle things that we could do to create an environment that is more supportive and nourishing.
These are all findings from a research project we did through Move Beyond Words, which was supported by Limbury Trust and JJ Charitable Trust, looking at ways we can create accessible spaces for those with dyslexia.
And it's very small things, like send a picture of the location that they're going to a few days in advance so they can picture where they're heading to. That's a big one. Make sure their travel plans are set and that they know where they're going, because getting lost is often something that happens, and time management. That's just a really simple thing, like send a picture of the space. Like, how long does that take? That's not a big thing.
Let the performer know how many people are involved in the production and what company members will be there in an audition setting and what the roles are. And casting directors must be willing to invite questions no matter what they are, and to not diminish the questions if they seem irrelevant or they feel like they've answered them before. Just let people have the space to share what they need to. And then a huge thing would be to invite any neurodivergent dancers, especially in an audition setting, bring them to the front of the room, invite them to the front of the room. Obviously there's no kind of dictating, but there's an invitation here for any people who are neurodivergent to come to the front of the room so that they can eliminate any distractions that there might be between you and the choreographer. That would just be incredible. And then casting directors also, if they could make time for the dancers to mark the choreography, again, this is in an audition setting, just to give them a little bit more time before the final audition. And something as well is just making sure that the neurodivergent people go into the last group so they've got time to watch the choreography a few more times, because repetition is incredibly helpful. So they're just like a few structural things in an audition setting that would massively help people who are neurodivergent feel more relaxed and enabled within that space.
Ask the question, is anybody here neurodivergent? Come and chat to us. If there's anything we can do to support and facilitate, we will do. That's a huge thing for casting directors, because then instantly you're enabling a safe space for people to, be seen within.
There's also a lot of ways that neurodivergent people can help themselves as well. companies can provide free resources as well. You know, things that I know work for me. Ahead of high-pressured environments that I'm going to go into, I make sure that I meditate, that I work out why I'm going there, what's my purpose, why am I going to put myself into a situation that induces my anxiety. Having a clear why enables me to remove myself and my challenges and have a greater purpose, and that ensures my anxiety just stays at bay. So, you know, everyone has their own ways in which they work, and it's our responsibility to find them, seek them out, talk to people, find what works for a friend. And I think finding your own value and reminding yourself of your own value, what makes you unique, what makes you valuable to this process, and just having those clear intentions before going into an audition or going into a meeting that feels daunting. Be clear in what your why is. You know, funding for neurodivergent projects has spiked, and I think that's partly due to the Arts Council England highlighting diversity and inclusion in their 3 investment principles for NPOs. You know, organisations have become increasingly aware and active in making systemic changes and supporting projects with a neurodivergent focus. And I think that's wonderful. And I just really hope that we start to see a shift.
I do also see that there's a lot of value that people are taking from the work that I'm making and that Charlotte Edmonds and I had previously made through our company Move Beyond Words. You know, there was a lot of value being put on that. I actually think it's worse for us to stay silent, because I think people have so many preconceptions that are so incredibly irrelevant and inaccurate that it's actually dangerous, I think, to stay silent. And we're missing the opportunities that come from being neurodivergent if we don't talk. I just think it's so important that we stop hiding, and if I can keep facilitating spaces where people can begin to feel comfortable and talk about what experiences they're going through, like, that's fantastic, and I really want to continue doing that, because it really matters. Like, everybody's experience matters, and I think we can really suffer in silence, and we don't have to. And also, we don't have to suffer. We have to vocalise what we need. Like, what do you need to feel comfortable, and is it possible? And I think because spaces are really listening now, that's an opportunity that we shouldn't miss.